And we welcome you back to Armchair Fantasy Football here on the Armchair Fantasy Football YouTube channel. Week 5 waivers. I am not alone, but my name is Cory Sparks, and we are here to help you out-research your opponent in fantasy football in Week 5 and in the 2024-25 season. And I am once again joined by Wally Lukachinsky, my partner in crime over at ESPN Radio here in Beaver Dam, Wisconsin, who is taking an hour out of his very busy Tuesday to join me. So, Wally, I appreciate you very much for that.
Absolutely. Anytime that we get to talk football together, I got to take advantage of it, Cory.
Absolutely. And, a lot to react to from this last week, whether it be the Vikings and Chiefs still staying undefeated, different touch battles, which we'll kind of be talking about today with a variety of our candidates, specifically in the running back category, and wide receivers and pass catchers in general as well. Just guys who are kind of taking over in more pivotal roles. As always, if you guys have any questions at all, those are going to take precedent. You pop those in the live chat, and I will relay them to Wally and myself, and we'll address those first and foremost. Otherwise, I think we can get started here. Wally, I'll let you do the honors, and then we'll kind of just rapid fire in alternating fashion.
Well, I think I have to start by the top saying that this shouldn't be a surprise to you, but to the people that don't know who I am, that's an Ohio State flag behind me. So I have been the biggest Justin Fields defender since day one. Thumbnail. And I have continued to go to bat for him. And I'm doing it again, Cory. And here's the thing. Even if you don't think Justin Fields is a good NFL quarterback, that's not the name of the game in fantasy football. It is about winning your fantasy matchups and getting fantasy points. Justin Fields, the way this Steelers offense is built, is going to look much more like that 2022 Chicago Bears Justin Fields, where they're going to ask him to run the ball 6 to 10 times. They're going to have him throw the ball 20, 25 times a game, but high percentage throws, opportunities to get those wide receivers in space and make plays after the catch. And who knows? We saw Davante Adams in the trade target, or at least the announcement today, that he might become available. The Steelers make way too much sense to be one of the shortlist teams involved in that. If you get Justin Fields now, who knows? Maybe you get a little 2-4 down the road where you're like, wow, I just got Justin Fields throwing to Davante Adams, albeit he's probably going to run the ball 10 times a game. But there you go, Cory. Justin Fields is my number one waiver wire pickup of the week this week.
I like that a lot, and I do like how you started your point, because so many people will rain on Justin Fields' parade, and myself included, now that he's not really a Bear anymore, but that, he can't read the field, things look ugly out there, but he has, over the course of the last 3 seasons, even though people don't feel like he took a big enough step forward last year, he's performed in fantasy. If you have a guy with rushing upside who plays the quarterback position, in the majority of point formats, you're going to get rewarded more times than you wouldn't, right? Because usually passing yards, it's 25 a pop to get a point, and rushing yards, just like with your running backs, right? Or your Deebo Samuels or Jaden Reed or Xavier Worthies, when they're running the ball, it's 10 yards a pop for a point. All of a sudden, even though Justin Fields turns the ball over a couple times and throws for only 200 yards for 1 touchdown through the air, you're like, oh, that was horrible. Well, he had 6 rushes for 65 yards and scored once or twice on the ground, and that makes up for literally everything. It's broken, but it is what it is, and he's performed very well. And typically, you also want to look at the environment of a player. How does their offense look? The Steelers don't have a sexy offense, but I would argue they look much better than they have the last couple of years, the pieces they've moved around. Now, Deontay Johnson, they did lose him. He's been tearing it up in the 2-week Andy Dalton era. But Pickens, extremely talented. Freiermuth is a quiet but reliable tight end. Kind of reminds me a lot of Cole Kmet in that regard. And you do have a good 1-2 punch in the backfield. And one of them, in Jaylen Warren, is a dump-off merchant. Like, all of a sudden, if Justin can't find anything, he has one of the most underrated and better pass catchers in the entire league. In Jaylen Warren, a little dump-off to him. He runs for 27 yards down the sideline. Justin gets the points, too. So, I like that a lot.
Something to keep in mind, too, is if the Steelers aren't as good, or you don't believe they're as good as that 3-1 record, they're going to fall off a little bit. They were playing from behind against the Colts this week. And just for instance, if you're playing your standard scoring system, Justin Fields was over a 30-point quarterback this last week. And with that defense, man, all of a sudden, you're going to have a lot of games where the Steelers are going to have the ball for 32, 33 minutes of the game. And I mentioned before, but if they find a way, whether it be Davante Adams, whether it be someone else that they add at the trade deadline at wide receiver, it just makes way, way too much sense for Justin Fields to be the guy for me. But Corey, I will be throwing it right back to you here once you're all squared away again. And
yeah.
I would love to hear your number one waiver wire guy for this week 5. How crazy is that, too? We are in week 5.
I saw you throw up on the Loss of Down podcast. By the way, if you guys look up Loss of Down in the YouTube search bar, you can find Mr. Lukachinsky's podcast that he shoots twice a week, much more consistent than me, as evidenced by the last 8 days. But yeah, real sense of panic just kicked in when I realized my laptop dropped to 10% and I did not have my charger. So thank you for riffing like a true professional there. But yeah, my number one guy.
I feel like I was just stumbling.
Yeah, my number one guy, it's kind of like Justin Fields as well, in that it's not too secretive. I'm not digging him out of the mud. A lot of people know about him. He just performed very well in prime time, yet in a losing effort. I'm going to go with Geno Smith. He lit the world on fire against the Lions yesterday, put up some really solid numbers. And really, since his resurgence, the thing that's so attractive to me about Geno Smith, even though it only impacts you 2 to 4 points at a time, he doesn't turn the ball over. He had a phenomenal touchdown interception ratio in his resurgence a couple of years ago. Last year wasn't too bad either, and he only has a couple of picks so far this year. He throws for volume. And the thing I love about Geno Smith so much, even though he is on the wrong side of 30 years old, in a dynasty capacity, he is set at the wide receiver position for the next few years. Everyone's talking about how Tyler Lockett is 32 years old. Tyler Lockett has really dipped off. DK Metcalf is going to be good for a very long time. This is looking like the best year of his career if we're tracking it over a 17-game period. And they also have a first-rounder from The Ohio State in Jackson Smith-Njigba, who is being utilized more and more after kind of being shamed out of that Shane Waldron-led offense last year. We saw him for a glimmer in like the November, December moments, and then didn't see him much towards the end. You have someone who is going to take over and arguably be better. He's a different type of receiver, is Jackson Smith-Njigba, but he's one of the better wide receiver prospects we've seen come out of that school, come out of college football, and he's going to be the 2 in the 1-2 punch alongside DK Metcalf. As far as Geno Smith's 5-year upside looks, as long as he's still kicking, he takes care of the ball, he has a very good supporting cast, and right now he's still owned in only 31% of leagues on ESPN. So I like Geno a lot.
You and I were talking about that earlier today when we were trying to brainstorm for this, and Geno is just, it makes too much sense. Shane Waldron, I know that you're a Bears guy, so I'm not trying to punch down right now at all, but everything that we've seen, it's like this guy's offense is not creative. It limits the playmaking ability of some of the best wide receivers on these teams. To get Jackson Smith-Njigba starting to look like the guy they drafted last year, what they thought they were getting, Ryan Grubb and Mike McDonald has this team on both sides of the ball, playing with their hair on fire, fired up, that you can tell there's an energy there. And they're going to be in these kind of games that we saw on Monday night against Detroit. They're going to be those high scoring, fast pace. Geno Smith throwing the ball downfield. It's the dream for fantasy kind of owners because the Seahawks defense, I still don't think is anything special. And they're going to be in the high scoring games. They're going to be having 12, 13 drive offensive games. And Geno Smith, man, I can't say enough about the growth of him.
Oh, yeah.
I was worried going into this year, too, because there was at least a little, nerves about Sam Howell coming in and potentially being a guy that could take reps if the Seahawks started slow. I think he's put that to bed in resounding fashion right now. Geno Smith is here, and he is going to be the quarterback for the rest of this year, at least in Seattle.
Yeah, and I just look at the volume, right? And you bring up a great point that he's in an interesting situation where he has a good supporting cast, except for the defensive side of the ball. This is why I was very attracted to different Commanders players last year. Before he got traded, Jahan Dotson's, your Terry McLaurin's, even Curtis Samuel, because I knew for a fact, and you could see it reflected in the run-pass ratio, that team was going to throw the ball more than anybody else because their defense allowed points above 30, pretty much more than anybody else. And Geno Smith, again, like a touchdown and a pick, didn't look that great on the stat sheet, but when someone throws for volume like that and can push the ball vertically and for the most part take care of the ball over the course of a long period of time, I'm looking between 2022 and 2023, 50 touchdowns, so 5 a year, and 20 interceptions, so 25 and 10. And he's throwing for about an average of 4,000 yards, just a tick under. I will take that every day of the week. So I really like his upside. If you guys are just joining, This is Armchair Fantasy Football. I'm Cory Sparks. That is Wally Lukachinsky. We are here to answer your fantasy football questions, and we do have a couple in the live chat right now. We have Sports Type saying, my RB2 is on a bye week, and I am 1-3. Is 38% FAAB bid on Trey Sermon good? Also, Antonio Gibson and Patterson are available. You're going to have to rewind my memory on what that stands for. I have not played that structure of fantasy football before, but I have answered questions on it. I used to look at it a lot more. Can you give me like some reference points, Sports Type, on just what percentages are going to different types of players? Gibson and Patterson are available. Gibson's been getting more pass catching upside as of late. Ramondre hasn't been getting a ton of touches, and Ramondre hasn't been very productive. And Ramondre, as is Gibson, you kind of have to be careful there because that is a running back on a team that is likely going to have to go throw heavy unless they bring in Drake May pretty soon and they go run heavy from the beginning to try and build the guy's confidence and not scare the crap out of him. Bo Murphy Packers is saying, what defense should I start? Pick two, pick three. Oh, pick 2 of 3, I'm guessing. Garrett Wilson, Jaden Reed, DK Metcalf, and Jamar Chase. Out of those, I would likely go Jaden Reed now that we have a volume passer in Jordan Love back. I would likely go DK Metcalf because of his prolific start through the first 4 weeks. And Jamar had a few big targets. A little concerned about the Jets offense. I know the Broncos defense has been great historically, and they have been great this year. But that was an ugly ball game, and those guys are not on the same page to the point where people are questioning Aaron Rodgers' hard count tactics, and now he's pissed at his coaching staff because it's always worked. There's a lot. So pick 3, I would go Reed, Metcalf, and Chase. Any defenses you could start, I would just stream against the weak guys. So if we look at the week 5 matchups, let's see here.
You're doing that right now and looking at that, the FAAB took me a minute too. Free agent acquisition budget.
Okay.
So that's where you're allotted a certain amount of money at the start of the year for waiver wire pickups. And I think he's just saying, basically putting 40% of his entire budget, maybe just for the week. I want to be clear. I'm not sure, but that's a lot.
Week by week basis is kind of my guess. If that's the case, Sports Type, just let me know kind of what other talent is out there. You're saying Gibson and Patterson are available. It seems like it's pretty slim pickings. Obviously, Sermon's in an interesting spot right now in Indy. I would say it's hard for me to gauge. I'll be honest with you. If you could tell me what you've spent on people in the past, I'm just not sure what guys are going for price-wise. I appreciate you giving me the context on Gibson and Patterson being available. And thank you, Wally, for looking that up because I was a little lost on the significance. I haven't seen that in a while. Bill Murphy, Packers. Yeah, so for the pick 3, I'd leave Wilson out for the moment. And then what defense should you start? The Dolphins and Patriots are playing each other this week, and I'm not even kidding. You could flip a coin, and you'd probably do well with either one. The projection for total points in that one is 35.5, which is pretty brutal. There's the Raiders and Broncos. I hate to pick on Wally here, who's a Raiders fan, but that's also 35.5. You could kind of take your pick there. And then if you go down the line and look for other teams that are kind of struggling on offense, struggling to get traction going at the moment, I might be interested in the Seahawks against the Giants. It is in Seattle. The Giants have had flashes. Malik Neighbors looks great, but for the most part, that's still a struggling offense. Outside of that, it's interesting because the 4 or 5 teams I would typically pick on are playing each other. Colts against the Jags. The Jags are at home. Maybe that's a get-right game, but they're 0-4 for a reason. You could go Colts, except for the fact that the Colts are one of the worst defensive teams in the league. So I am probably flipping a coin between the Dolphins, Patriots, Raiders, and Broncos. We have a lot of lower-tier offenses facing each other. The Bears' offense is starting to wake up a little bit. They are going up against the Panthers team that was able to get to the quarterback a couple times in the last couple of weeks, but for the most part, I'm going to kind of just rely on low totals here, and it's those 2 matchups for now.
Tell you what, that Raiders-Broncos game, just fun tidbits off the top of my head. The Raiders haven't lost to the Broncos in, I think, 9 tries.
Oh, wow.
They've really forced, I know Sean Payton's only been there to 1 year, but they have really forced quarterbacks into uncomfortable situations in that matchup. They just don't match up well with that Max Crosby-led defense. You just have to hope Max Crosby's back. That's like, keep that on the top of your radar. But Tyree Wilson looked like the top 10 pick that the Raiders drafted for the first time in his career last week. There's like little nuggets of hope there, but man, you said it. All 4 of those offenses are dog water, and I would want to have a defense playing them every time I have an opportunity.
I love that term. Yeah, that is a good point when you get a little more granular. Just make sure that the playmakers are actually playing. If Max Crosby's not playing, maybe I don't feel as good, but I would gladly prowl on Bo Nix and that rough-looking offense that was saved by a missed 50-yard field goal by Greg Zerloin in an eventual, very anticlimactic, not that I was expecting much to begin with, 10-9 ball game. So, yeah, I would pick on the Broncos there, especially if Mad Max is healthy. We have Brian Pereira in the chat saying congrats on the 1,000 subscriber. Yeah, thank you so much on the milestone. I do appreciate that, guys. Wally's a huge reason why that we were kind of getting to the end of it. We got him on and got a decent amount of traction a little over a week and a half ago, and just trying to be consistent and help you guys out as much as possible. We will be doing a free jersey giveaway. Video to come on that, live stream to come on that. I'll be getting you guys a free NFL jersey for a player of your choice. Hoping to do that at some point here in October, so stay tuned for that. And then Brian's saying, picked up Jonathan Brooks, Garrett Wilson, and Jaden Daniels for CMC and George Pickens. Oh, so this is a trade. Brooks, Wilson, Daniels, CMC, and Pickens. So if we're going straight across CMC and Pickens, obviously we have to wait out on CMC. I keep seeing stuff about possible tendinitis in his knees. I feel like every time I see his name come up, it gets worse. So Brooks, CMC, Wilson, Pickens. I do think Wilson still obviously has long-term upside. Even with how rough the Jets have looked at times, he's in a way better quarterback situation. And then Pickens, you're getting a very talented wide receiver one on an offense that's starting to fling the ball around a little bit more. Say what you will about Justin Fields. Threw for over 300 last week. They were down, but showed ability to push it. So I like it. I could see you're kind of trying to make a splash. We just really have to rely on CMC's the deal breaker there, or the deal maker for you. Jerry Moose says, I'm 1-3. Would you trade Kupp and Sam Darnold for Olave? Ooh. We know we have Darnold for the year. We know Kupp will be back for Olave in an offense that's kind of coming down to earth. Other quarterbacks and wide receivers are Baker, T. Higgins, Darnell Mooney, and Michael Pittman. So I see you are trying to get an immediate answer, and there's some urgency kicking in because you don't have Cooper Kupp on the football field, and you are 1-3. So you would instead have Higgins, Olave, Higgins. Probably Olave, Higgins, Mooney, and Pittman. Pittman's a decent 3 out of those 3. He might even be the 2 over Higgins. Kupp and Darnold for Olave? I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
So here's my thing. I love Derek Carr. I'll defend him, but he's never going to be the guy that's going to bring in those massive fantasy numbers. And that's a direct, impacts Chris Olave. Olave's been great so far, but as teams are going to be keying on him more as this season goes on and this offense feels more and more one-dimensional, I get a little worried about Chris Olave's upside and what he can do. So I am a little worried that you'd be selling. I guess you are. The goal is to be selling high here with Sam Darnold, but I'm just a little worried that you're not going to get as much when Cooper Kupp comes back. You have that Sean McVay offense that is going to be playing basically backs against the wall for the rest of the year if they have any shot of playing relevant football. I like the idea of Cooper Kupp coming back where that offense is in love with throwing him the ball 18 times a game. So, man, I love Chris Olave. I think that he's going to be a solid player, but are you going to hate your life if Cooper Kupp comes back and he turns into Cooper Kupp again?
I think you need, so put a pin in that. I actually have a solution. I think we're going to upgrade a little more at the wide receiver spot and buy, not low, but buy lower than we had last week because he was the wide receiver one. I misread Brian's text, or I guess chat. He said picked up. He got Brooks, he got Wilson, and a rookie quarterback with a completion percentage above 80 right now in Jaden Daniels gave away CMC and Pickens. I do like that a lot. Brooks isn't going to move the needle much, obviously, but Wilson, and then you get the immediate answer at the wide receiver position, and Jaden Daniels looks like a top 5 quarterback in fantasy right now, rushing upside, accuracy, and everything. So I like that a lot. Jerry, I would go for, you might, I don't know if you have to throw more in. You might have to wait a week or two once we get closer to Kupp's return date, but Wally knows this, you guys know this, big Chris Godwin fan, and your quarterback is Baker Mayfield. There's a possible stack there. And Chris Godwin kind of came down to earth this week. You know, he wasn't putting up 25 points. So I don't know if more will have to be put in, but you can definitely make the argument, as Wally just said, that Cooper Kupp is getting 16, 18 targets when he's fully healthy. Sometimes whether Puka's in there or not. And you could have your Baker Godwin stack as well. I just think if you're going to do a 2-for-1 deal, I know you want the immediate answer, but you need more consistent return. And I think Chris Godwin is somebody that comes to mind. I think if the Dolphins get a better timetable on when Tua comes back, now you're kind of comparing two guys, but maybe you go after somebody like Tyreek Hill. I don't know how much sense that makes because he's going to be gone for a while. But yeah, Jason saying, should I trade Keon Coleman for Zay Flowers? If you can, I would. I know Keon Coleman's had 2 better weeks. There is still the 0-point debacle that's going to stick in the back of a lot of people's minds. Zay Flowers, the consistent wide receiver 1. I've seen Rashad Bateman get a little more targets. Isaiah Likely now is starting to make me eat my words. I think he is just the tight end 1 this year. They're using Mark Andrews in different ways, and he had a crucial drop in a game that ended up being a blowout anyway. I think I like Zay Flowers a lot more. You might have to throw in more than Keon Coleman at this very moment. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, Wally.
Slam dunk, Zay Flowers all day more. They're going to utilize that guy. He's kind of got kind of similar to the way that Kansas City designed Tyreek Hill when he was there, where they're going to use him in about 8 different positions. He can play outside. He can play in the slot. They can bring him into the backfield and play from there. They'll hand him the ball off. So this is a guy that the fact that you have that much volume, it makes it a slam dunk. And the Bills, man, I'm a little worried about Keon Coleman. I know he had a couple big weeks here, but if I have the option to have Keon Coleman or Zay Flowers, who I know is basically focal point number 1 after Derrick Henry, it's a no-brainer.
Yeah, Jason, I would make the trade. You might just have to throw in more than Keon Coleman because the last thing you want to do is throw someone a trade that might be a little too far off and then you've cut a bridge. Not saying that would happen here. I do think it's a possibility. If they brought up Keon Coleman and Zay Flowers, make that deal yesterday. Do it. But just make sure that you're ready to throw somebody else in because, yeah, Zay Flowers is going to see way more volume. And I talked before at the beginning of the year, and many did, about how the Bills have a wide open receiving core. I actually still feel like Dalton Kincaid's going to lead that team in receiving this year because there's some cohesiveness from last year. But Khalil Shakir looks a lot more consistent right now than Keon Coleman. It's still relatively wide open, but that's where the value's at the moment. No problem, Jason. Sports Type says, rate my team, 12-team league. Record is 1-3, and then we will get back to some waivers, but thank you guys for joining. Again, I'm Cory, that's Wally. This is Armchair Fantasy Football. Make sure you leave a like and subscribe if you want to out-research your fantasy opponent in 2024 and in Week 5. We're looking at Sports Type's comment here. League record is 1-3. You've got Jaden Daniels under center, and then in the running back room, you have James Cook and David Montgomery out wide, Justin Jefferson, A.J. Brown. Holy shit, okay. David Njoku, Garrett Wilson, Amari Cooper, Brian Thomas, and Isaac Garendo. I'm just shocked that you're 1-3. You might be one of the top scorers in your league. Yeah, I'm reading this team, and I almost swore on the mic there. And I'm just like, what are we? How are we 1-3? That's a great team. Jaden Daniels with the rushing upside and accuracy. James Cook has been productive. He's in one of the best situations. Did not have a good week last week. Anytime you're a running back on a team that gets blown out, you're not going to do well. Montgomery gets red zone and goal line touches galore. You have Justin Jefferson in a much better spot than we thought he was in quarterback-wise. You have the wide receiver 1 for a great, although sometimes turnover-prone, Eagles offense, but they still push the ball down the field. Njoku's solid at tight end. Garrett Wilson is now, we're on your bench. I guess this would be your flex. And then you have Amari Cooper, Brian Thomas, and Garand. I like the team a lot. I would honestly hang tough. I'm assuming you just played against...
Don't stress.
Yeah, I'm assuming you played against like a high-profile team or two. But yeah, I'm 1-3. A.J. Brown and Njoku have been hurt, then just some unlucky weeks. That's true, but yeah, I was going to say, there's got to be some element of luck there. Johnny D says, what to do with Devontae Adams? Yeah, the Raiders are wondering the same thing. I'm thinking of buying low on him now that he requested a trade. Okay, you don't have him. That's the good news. Maybe flipping a Garrett Wilson. Devontae's going to play football again this year. There are almost no players out there who are holding out for the sake of holding out. Some people are holding out for a contract. Some people are holding out for a different environment, something in between. Devontae is holding out for likely a different environment. What was the quote that Antonio Pierce said? Something about business decisions, right? And the next thing you know, Devontae's not playing. So yes, if you are in the buyer's market, his value is as low as it's going to be right now. You need to understand the risk you're taking. He might not touch the field until week 7, But if you're going to buy strictly based on value, flipping a Garrett Wilson, I'll tell you what, the more he holds out and the more doubt grows, his value is not that high in my opinion. I think that you could get away with less than Garrett Wilson. I don't know if you have a parallel or similarly valued type of player that's around that Garrett Wilson range. You're certainly not going to trade like an Allen Lazard and get him. But I'd be curious because he's going to miss a couple of weeks. Maybe Garrett Wilson is fair, but you definitely need to step down from where he would be.
So I'm interested right now because my pushback for you is that I'm trying to place off the top of my head a really good wide receiver that got traded midseason and went and hit the ground running wherever he went. Because this isn't about making that team better. It's about making fantasy team better.
Right.
And how often do you see a guy get traded, immediately gel with a playbook, and start putting up those 20-point weeks? It really doesn't happen. I'm was literally over here. I've been Googling for like 3 minutes, and I'm trying to find one, and I'm really struggling. I just get concerned because I said the Justin Fields thing at the top, but like, let's say Davante Adams is traded to Pittsburgh, for instance.
Yep.
How good of an environment really is that for Davante? And if you're going to then buy in, like right now, you better be smart about being deep enough fantasy-wise. Otherwise, you're going to hate yourself in a month.
You know what? That's a phenomenal point. I'm even thinking back to the headspace that a lot of people were in regarding Brandon Ayuk about a month ago, where they're like, do I buy low on Brandon Ayuk? We don't know where he's going to be. Well, you really don't know what you're buying then. What if he ended up on the Patriots and Jacoby Brissett and soon-to-be Drake May was throwing him the ball? What if he ended up on, I don't know, what if he ended up on a team and then the quarterback was down and they decided to make a stab for it? There are so many different environments that he could be put in, and if you are buying him and trading, Garrett Wilson's probably your 2, he might be your 1. Honestly, where he was drafted, he's probably your 1. Trading your wide receiver 1 for somebody we don't know where he's going to go. Let's say, okay, best case scenario. Let's say Davante Adams is traded to the Steelers. He does not play in week 5. There's no way on earth he's learning the playbook in 2 or 3 days. If he did, he wouldn't play in much. So let's say he plays week 6. So now Davante has missed week 4 and week 5. You're suffering the blow of missing your wide receiver 1 and slotting everybody up 1 value in week 5. But now week 6... does he know the whole playbook? Is he going to be out there for 90% of snaps? Probably not. Okay, now week 7, now week 8, how long does it take for somebody to fully feel comfortable? You know, we saw some miracles not too long ago, like when Baker Mayfield went over to the Rams and won on like 4 games' notice. Those are called miracles for a reason. We remember those things for a reason. They don't happen often. You make a very good point that kind of just flipped me 180, Wally. I'm not sure I'd make this deal, especially if you are considering giving up your wide receiver 1. Because yes, did the Jets look crappy against a tough Broncos defense? Sure. But you know what you're getting in Garrett Wilson. Davante could literally go anywhere. There's a handful of teams where it seems realistic. But Davante could theoretically go anywhere. And he could also hold out for a couple more weeks. You don't know when he's going to play. You don't know where he's going to play. And as a result, you don't know how he's going to play. So I would actually steer clear entirely. Especially if the person with Davante is saying Garrett Wilson or bust. Run the other direction.
My only additional point, it goes into it because the one guy that popped into my head, I know he was tail end of stardom, but when Odell was with the Browns and he forced his way into LA, what happened the rest of that year with the Los Angeles Rams, with a heck of a coaching staff, a potential future Hall of Famer quarterback? He was in LA for 8 games. He had 27 catches, so less than 4 a game, for 305 yards. So he averaged like what is that? 4 catches for 40 yards a game.
Yeah.
Like is that like I just am worried that that's what you're gonna get if you go after a team that's desperate enough to potentially trade too much for Davante Adams at this point. It's not the Super Bowl teams that are like, let me give him a call. It feels like the teams that are like, I'm a couple players away, or Davante's gonna push me over the top. I just get worried about that situation he's going into.
That's a very good point. It's just there's no promising, even if he goes into a hypothetically good situation, how long until he has actually mastered the entirety of the playbook? He didn't get the offseason. He did not get the preseason. He is going to get, likely, if this happens early in the week, 5 days before his debut. Then he is going to get 12 days before his second game. And then all of a sudden you start to realize, until we get to a month or two, which now we're near the end of the season, depending on when this happens. We haven't really simulated a wide receiver one comfortable in their environment, and now you're in the playoffs, or maybe you're not. So, yeah, I like that idea a lot, and that's probably a bigger risk, especially if he's being valued at the level of a Garrett Wilson than it feels on the surface. Sports Type had that really good roster saying we don't have a wide receiver 3, traded Pollard and Ayuk to get Jefferson. Nice job. That looks very good right now, especially in lieu of recent events with Ayuk looking suboptimal. I can speak firsthand on that. Johnny D says, imagine Devontae and Russell Wilson doing the high knees exercises. That's the funniest comment of the day.
Let's go.
Yeah, on the plane, of course. I wonder if T. Higgins is a decent trade value for Adams. That's interesting. Do they make the trade and say, well, Devontae might not fully be up to his effectiveness, but we still have one of the best talents in the league? And, everybody, maybe not everybody anymore, but 3 out of the 4 teams in the AFC North believe they're making the playoffs. I would leave the Browns out of there right now.
Agreed.
Maybe you give Adams that offer. You get him. You give, I guess, the Raiders that offer. You get him. The Raiders get an established wide receiver who has a couple 1,000-yard seasons under his belt and is going to be happier in his situation. They probably wouldn't take the deal if he wasn't. And maybe Adams goes over there and, he's getting 50, 60 yards. But if he's the second fiddle to Jamar Chase and you know what Devontae is capable of from a pure athleticism standpoint, yeah, we're on the 20 and we have to toss up a fade route in the corner because it's 4th and forever and the game's on the line. It helps to have 2 of those guys, even if he's not getting as many targets. From a fantasy perspective, again, I think that's a wild card, but T. Higgins that's an interesting one. I want to go back to Sports Type's comment because it relates to the next waiver wire pick that I want to throw in here, and then I'll toss it back to you, Wally. I know I'm kind of breaking the pattern here, but actually, you got a running back, don't you? You also have a running back, right?
Yeah. Oh, okay. You're good.
We can just give our running back picks. It doesn't matter who goes first then. Yeah, we'll let you go, and then I've got one of my own. Last thing, Brian says, can't trust Adams, has all the talent, but needs a great quarterback to give him the ball. I will not take any Gardner Minshew slander. All right, on we go. I'm just kidding, Brian, but big fan of Gardner. All right, off we go. We'll go into running backs for Sports Type. Hopefully find you an RB3 option this week.
Yeah, so I'll go and actually stick with your boys, the Wisconsin Badger native, Braylon Allen. He has been absolutely electric, totally efficient, where Breece Hall has been the opposite. He's not looked like the Breece Hall we've kind of grown accustomed to. And if that continues, you're going to see him dip into that little share of the running back share. He's only, I think he's averaging 4.8 yards per carry right now, where Breece Hall is at 3.1. Braylon looks like he's already becoming one of Aaron's favorite players on the offense. And I'm not an Aaron Rodgers guy, but we've seen it time and time again. If Aaron Rodgers is in your corner, you're going to get the ball. He's going to find a way to utilize you, and that's going to continue to happen. The way he's running, how hard he is, how fast, I heard it, but how fast he's been, I think that he can truly be like an emerging guy that at some point this year could become a league winner, especially with the way running back health is. If Breece Hall gets dinged up, Braylon Allen has the potential to walk in and be like a top 8 back overnight.
I'm going to try and focus on everything that you said after I heard it. Jeez.
As soon as I said it, I'm like, I checked. I got it.
All
right, my bad.
I didn't hear it until you said I heard it. So if that helps you feel any better. I do love what you said for a couple of reasons. We've seen the telltale example with the guy we were just talking about, Davante Adams, where Packer fans got to a point where they were going, he's just forcing him the ball. But fantasy owners don't care. Nope. So if you've got somebody who is in Aaron Rodgers' corner, or Aaron Rodgers is in his corner, they're going to get the ball. The 4 rules that we have on the right side of the screen, they apply very well to Braylon Allen. He's been available so far. That's a given. That's not a groundbreaking statement. Opportunity. Okay, so I'll skip around, actually. Available, number 3, productivity. We are looking at somebody out of the backfield, limited rushes so far, who has taken 1 rush for 8 yards, 7 for 33, that's 4.7 yards a carry, 11 for 55, that's 5 in the dot, and 8 for 34, that's 4.25. He is one of the most productive backs in the league at just 20 years old, and he is a brick you-know-what house at 235 pounds. He's extremely productive on the ground, and he had a nice little stretch between weeks 2 and 3, pass-catching upside for you PPR owners who are interested in that, which you should be in the running back position, 4 targets, 2 catches for 23 yards, 3 targets, 3 catches for 13 yards, back down. Okay, so we've got availability. We have productivity. Opponent strength is going to vary. He does have a nice matchup with Buffalo in a couple weeks, and then New England 4 weeks after that. And then I'm looking at the opponent strength meter right now on Sleeper. In weeks 13 through 18, they are all green. So if you're looking at someone who could perform in the playoffs for you, there's that as well. Now with Braylon Allen, opportunity, snap count, 18%, 35%, 32%, 36%, and the productiveness has stayed there. Teams have to plan for him more, and he's still productive. I really like what could happen, not in the next 5 years, not in the next few months. In the next 3 or 4 weeks, I would not be shocked if Braylon Allen is touching the ball 12, 14 times a game if he keeps it up. Especially like you said, Wally,
Amen.
if Breece Hall continues to average 2.5, 3 yards a carry in large sample sizes, the interest only grows. And the Jets can be a winning football team, especially with that defense. I really like that pick.
Let's go. That's what I'm talking about. He feels like one of those guys that every year there's 2 or 3 that you're like, wow, he just happens to be buried in a great running back room. Tyler Algier's one that comes to my mind, where if Bijan didn't pop up, he's a guy that's a starting running back in this league. He just coincidentally is playing behind somebody that people have otherworldly expectations in, and that's the same with Braylon Allen and Breece Hall.
Yeah, there's a handful of guys, right, where it just feels like, gosh, could he have been put in a different backfield? There's a handful that would take it in front of him. Saquon comes to mind, a healthy Jonathan Taylor. If you put Braylon Allen, I'm trying to think, right? If you put him in the current Browns backfield without Nick Chubb, I think he steals the job from Jerome Ford. With the way he's able to power, I love Jerome Ford, but with the way he powers through contact, with the way he is able to so far be efficient in a pretty small sample size, but with every opportunity he's been given, and they've been growing, he's looked good. Brian also saying, I wonder if the Cowboys make a swing on a deal and give Dak another. I'd be shocked if they could pull that off, because I know for a fact, even though the Raiders know that Devontae might be holding out for the foreseeable future, they would be giving the Cowboys a CeeDee Lamb, Devontae Adams 1-2 punch. And then Brandon Cooks would be the 3. I know he's up there in age. And then you have Jake Ferguson, who could be a top 5 tight end this year. That'd be a very fun team to watch, but I'd be shocked. Jason Noble says start Dak or Justin Fields, or see if Anthony Richardson is cleared to play this week. Not playing with Anthony Richardson fresh off an injury. I would almost say that with any quarterback. He has been so volatile so far this year. Between Dak and Justin Fields, obviously with Fields we get the rushing upside, somebody who threw for over 300 yards. Playing
each other.
Oh, they're playing each other. A Sunday Night Football. Yeah. Ooh. That's a toss-up.
Dude, I don't think here's the thing. You're going to maybe start looking at me weird. I'm starting Justin Fields.
Yeah. I mean, Dak is great. He's a great volume passer. He's going to throw you touchdowns. He has a good support system. The thing I'm curious about, as Pittsburgh is a 2.5-point favorite, I would favor the Cowboys, but the thing I'm curious about is regardless of what happens with Justin Fields, he will get you points. If he's working from behind, he's throwing the ball. If he is ahead, he's a part of the run game. If Dak is ahead, it might be over for his fantasy production in the fourth quarter. It might be hand the ball off to my next waiver wire option, and that is Rico Dowdle. Rico Dowdle is a bit of a deeper move. He has been getting more touches as of late. We talk about that second sector of fantasy guidelines and opportunity. He's been seeing more of it. 3.9 yards a carry, coming off a rough recent performance, but Zeke's at 3.3, 3.4. Zeke is a lot older, and this is one of those guys. I don't love to do the eye test in fantasy because the data is what you need to rely on, but Rico is far and away more explosive than Zeke. The only part I would get worried about is kind of what we saw in New England, and even in Dallas a couple of years ago when Tony Pollard was the way more productive back before his injury in the offseason. Zeke is a touchdown poacher. That has literally been his personality the last about 3 years here in fantasy. But I do think that Rico Dowdle, especially in a dynasty capacity, I was talking about guys like Chase Brown 4 weeks ago. Guess what? The price just went up. You can't grab him for free anymore. I was going to put him on this list. He's already owned in 55% of leagues. I think Rico Dowdle is an easy one to look at again. The Cowboys aren't stupid, right? Like, they understand Zeke's not going to be there forever. As much as they want to hem and haw about the nostalgia of getting their guy back, they need to have a plan for the future, and Deuce Vaughn is not on the field. So by default, Rico Dowdle's going to have to get more and more touches, and he's been relatively productive, more productive than his battering ram mate in Zeke. So that's a bit of a sneakier one. I'm not going to tell someone to go out and get Rico and start him this week, but he might be someone that you hold on to for a couple weeks, and by week 9 or 10, he's touching the ball 15 to 18 times.
I think that's a fantastic pick. I know Zeke's my guy. He's another one that's just a Buckeye that feels like he's been around 115 years, just a vulture of touchdowns at this point. I thought Deuce Vaughn would be the guy. To see Ricky Dowdle come out, and he is more explosive. He's more that prototypical size and athleticism. I think that's why you are going to see him eventually get that extra uptick there in value. This just might be a bad matchup this week for him. So if there's a chance that maybe you want to get another player with the waiver wire this week and then just, hope that you get lucky next one, that's at least how I would be looking, or I guess double up. But the Steelers this week, they're going to at least slow up the run. The reason why, going back real quick to the Justin Fields, Dak Prescott thing, I think that the Cowboys are getting kind of like a pass, given that they've been highly successful the last couple of years. They beat an awful Cleveland Browns team. They beat a terrible New York Giants team. And they got mollywopped in their other 2 games against competent football teams. So I'm starting to get worried. I'm starting to think that the Cowboys are frauds. And if that's the case, this is when you kind of abandon ship on some of them. So I guess if I'm going pushback, that would be where it is. But even if you're on a bad team, guys like Rico Dowdle are going to get a higher uptick because you are going to be checking down more when you are losing. That is where I love having some of my running backs on my team being on bad football teams, because there's nothing better, especially in PPR leagues, than when you look down at the box score and you're like, man, my guy had 12 rushes for 20 yards. He must have had a bad day. Oh, wait a minute. He had 8 catches for 43 yards too. Boom. There you go. Another 12 points for no reason whatsoever. I'm fired up for that. It's part of the reason why I think Jonathan Brooks, when he does come back too, is going to be a great player to have in any kind of league, honestly.
Even guys like Chuba Hubbard, right? With the Panthers obviously not being a great team, even with Andy Dalton, they fell again this last week. They're now 1-3. I get scared with running backs on bad teams unless you have a Ramondre Stevenson, unless you have somebody with the makeup of Jonathan Brooks, unless you have Rico Dowdle, who's got a game under his belt already with 5 targets. So it's those things where you start to go, well, as long as they're a part of the passing game, it is fine. If you have a hard nose, I'm going to power through contact, and I don't have much pass catching upside. Holy cow. Then it kind of gets
drilled
tough.
It.
Yeah, very tough, very tough. We're killing it out here. But, yeah. And then Jason saying, appreciate that, no problem. Cowboys also lost 2 of their pass rushers. That is true. Alex Ducharme saying, Daniels versus Fields both have the running and passing game in their toolbox, but I can't stop thinking about chasing the points with Fields. Yeah, because Fields had a great week this week, and they were working from behind, and then it was competitive, so there wasn't a blowout. They didn't take Fields out. I think I would say Justin still. He does have a great supporting cast around. It's so close, though, because actually...
Don't expect a 30-point game. That's the key, because I don't think either of those quarterbacks are going to do anything special this week, but it's like Justin gives you 21 points, ugly box score, and does it, and Dak gives you 18, but it looks prettier with your eyeballs.
Yeah.
You got to take the ugly 21.
That's true. We've got someone asking about Jaden Daniels or Justin Fields, and now I'm just thinking like, because Daniels does have that horrible defense, and he has been the most accurate quarterback, and he does have rushing upside. I'd probably go Daniels long-term, because also there's no quarterback controversy in Washington. There's still talk in Pittsburgh. If they fall back down to earth and are 3-3, and Russ is feeling a little better after doing those high knees on the plane, and Justin's not playing as good, then maybe they give it up. I mean, they're not financially tied to either of those guys, but Jason Noble saying... Justice Hill for a stash? Yes. he put on a show. Last game, he put on a show in week 1. He has a different skill set than Derrick Henry, to the point that I still feel fine if you blind me and tell me there's a box score this is hindsight bias, I guess. There's a box score where Derrick Henry gets 199 rush yards like he just did. Are you starting Justice Hill? Depending on who I have in my toolbox, I might still do it because he's still getting a few targets a game. And like Wally said, you can have 10 rushes for 20 yards, but as long as you have a few catches in there, all is right in the world. And Justice Hill, because of his skill set compared to Derrick Henry had his first touchdown reception in 4 years on Monday night. On Sunday night, excuse me. Justice Hill has a different skill set. So yes, I do like him a lot. I'm going Daniels over Fields because of the security of the situation. And I think we're good so far there. So yes, this is Armchair Fantasy Football. Cory and Wally with you, kind of just covering our Week 5 waiver wire pickups. We have gone through the running back room. Wally, I've got 2 more. I'll toss it back to you first.
Yeah, so I'm at my last one, and it's going to be a rookie pickup at wide receiver. Awful football team, but we don't care. They don't ask how. They ask how many when it comes to fantasy football. And Xavier Legette is going to start seeing more targets. He's going to start being more of a focal point of this offense, especially with Andy Dalton looking more like a competent quarterback. It looks like an NFL team now these last 2 weeks with Andy Dalton as the starting quarterback. Really it's facts. It's facts. I'm just pointing out. Like, I think Bryce Young, he's not gotten a fair shot. What I will say is, when you're in a bad situation, having a vet like Andy Dalton is a good thing to have, especially with a guy like Dave Canales. So Xavier Legette is going to start looking better. He had a slow week in that big win against the Raiders a couple weeks ago, but he looked much more like what the first round they traded up for to get him this last week. Well, I want to say it's 6 big catches again. Yeah. They're targeting him upwards of 10 times. This is going to be a focal point now. I know Deontay Johnson's going to get a lot of attention. So when the ball's not going to him, Xavier Legette on cornerback 2, maybe a little softer coverage, feed it to me. I want the South Carolina kid on my side.
You showed me his accent earlier today, and I'm in love.
That might be part of the problem, is that if you pick him up, I would expect you to use him in your fantasy name in some capacity because I'm in love with this guy. If you've not heard this guy speak, after this is over, go and Google Xavier Legette accent. You will be in love like I am.
You will not be disappointed. Xavier, along with having a phenomenal accent, the numbers look good as well. He had an 87% snap percentage after not passing 60 through the first 3 weeks. Andy Dalton coming in inflated that passing game. And 10 targets in the first 3 weeks combined for 6 receptions and 77 yards. In week 4 alone, 10 targets, 6 receptions, 66 yards, and his first career tutty in the NFL. The secondary option, another thing I love is that even though they look like an NFL football team, under Andy Dalton, I think the Carolina Panthers will still be a losing NFL football team. We kick back to a squad that's going to have to throw the ball a lot in the second half. Interested to see what happens against the Bears. I feel like the sneaky upset already happened, but that also just has murky waters. So we will see, but I like that pick a lot. I will now go out wide to, Legette feels like as long as they hold on to Dalton for a handful of weeks, someone who has more long-term upside. This is pretty short-term. This is plug and play, and hopefully your situation gets better and you don't need him in a couple of weeks because he's not going to be as effective. I'm going to go Tutu Atwell. It's kind of a common sense answer if we're just picking a Rams wide receiver to say, okay, no Puka Nacua and no Cooper Kupp. No wonder you're here. 12.7 points per contest in PPR in the last 2 weeks. And I'm just going off sheer usage. We're looking at guys like Whittington. We're looking at guys like Kyron Williams getting more pass catching upside as long as it's a competitive ball game. And even if it isn't, we've got the checkdowns in a losing situation. I'll take somebody who's averaging 13 points per contest in the last 2 weeks. And Tutu Atwell just not as highly searched, not as owned as some of these other names. So truly, if you do need someone to plug in and you're kind of just looking for hope, he's owned in 7% of leagues. That's one of those where I can almost guarantee, not a coin flip, I can almost guarantee he will be available. And I'll round it out with Tyler Conklin. I wanted to leave tight ends out of this. I did, but I also know the fact it looks so vacant out there also means if someone's tight end goes down, if you're in a recent Evan Ingram situation, you're feeling screwed. So Tyler Conklin is an option. The tight end landscape is just so weird, Wally, and I'm sure you can agree. There's like 5 or 6 really good names, and it is a sharp drop-off after that. It is a drop-off riddled with inconsistency, with stress, and with people starting to bring up that age-old argument of, let's omit this guy from the team. We shouldn't have tight ends. There's people who are in that camp as well. We work with one of them, Charlie Dern.
No,
I'm
that's
pretty
so
sure he doesn't like
disappointing.
tight ends. I'm pretty sure. I'd have to check in on that. It's either tight ends or kickers, but everyone says kickers. But Tyler Conklin, in the last 2 weeks, 5 receptions on 6 targets against New England for 93 yards. We take those. 4 receptions on 8 targets for 17 yards against Denver. Rougher game. Obviously, we know the result of that game, 10-9. The fact he was still getting volume in a game where nobody had a good game pretty much gives me promise. They're still looking after him. Minnesota's up next, then an easier matchup in Buffalo, then a little tougher against Steel City, and then a rematch against New England where he had a season-best game so far. There's chances for Tyler Conklin. I just hope he is not your tight end one for a long period of time. This is truly a use him and then hopefully down the road lose him as your tight end one of actual value comes back. So those are my 2 in that regard.
After about 5 or 6, like you were saying, tight ends, man. And even if you have one of the top 5 or 6, it is such an inconsistent position. I can't remember who it was in a chat earlier talking about having one of the best rosters, but they're 1-3. David Njoku was their tight end.
Yeah.
When he's on the field, David Njoku is one of the best tight ends in football.
Yep.
Problem is, there's a lot of times he's not. And it happens so much at this position. Tyler Conklin, he's going to have the chances. Just realize, man, I don't care who it is. If you were waiver wiring for a tight end, you are talking about boom or bust. You might be looking at 1 or 2 point weeks. You're probably not getting anything better than a 12 or a 13.
Yeah, we're straight shooters here. Like, I can look at data with other players and tell you long-term upside. There could be a serious trend upward with guys like Rico Dowdle, with guys like, as long as he still has his job and Russell Wilson doesn't come back, Justin Fields is always going to be an asset with the rushing upside. With guys like Tutu Atwell, not long-term, but in the situation he's in right now. Tyler Conklin, it's so tough. David Njoku is a perfect example, too, of the team is kind of just building and crafting around the tight end. Not for the tight end, literally around them. Oh, Nick Chubb went down. We need more wide receiver help. Let's go find an unhappy Jerry Jeudy. Well, now all of a sudden they're investing in their pass catchers. They're a traditionally run-heavy team. And if Amari Cooper and Jerry Jeudy have a good few weeks, and then Nick Chubb comes back, and they decide we're a run-heavy team again, you are SOL because they're not throwing the ball anyway, and even if Njoku is healthy. So it is such a tough position. It is so tough.
It's so hard. I'm not ready to say let's get rid of it from fantasy football, though, like certain people out there. I can't believe that started being like a talking point this week. I get the defense and kicker arguments, and I disagree with them. But the idea of taking tight ends, too, let's just cut out the middleman and just make it wide receivers and running backs at this point. What are we even doing?
Yeah.
I'm tired, Corey.
The live chat was active for a bit. Looks like it's kind of dialing down. If you guys have any last-second questions, I'm Corey. That's Wally. This is Armchair Fantasy Football. We are helping you out-research your fantasy opponent in 2024, giving away a free NFL jersey for a player of your choice, even if it's Gardner Minshew, especially if it's Gardner Minshew, or Cam Ward, if you're a college person too. But a free jersey of your choice will be coming up this month. I will have details and a huge thank you video coming out very soon on that. So keep an eye on that, as well as entry details. We're going to need some type of information from you. That way I can contact you and we can work out the details for your free jersey. But yeah, that was 7 waiver wire pickups. We had Geno Smith, Rico Dowdle, Tutu Atwell, Justin Fields. Your 2 others were
Xavier Legette.
Yep.
And Braylon Allen. Wow, I was like, did I forget my own people?
Yeah. Alexander Madison is one I didn't write down, but he's one that you can keep an eye on as well, just with Zamir White being relatively inefficient and Madison having that pass-catching upside. Even if the Raiders are, especially without Adams, more of a 7 or 8 win team, that's still somebody in Alexander Madison who's had pass-catching upside. We saw it from the jump in week 1. But yeah, those are your 7. You can count at 8 if you'd like to with Alexander Madison. We'll be streaming a couple more times this week as we get closer to week 5. Much more active this week. Of course, you can always join the free Discord as well if you would like round-the-clock help. That's a huge asset, obviously, if I am not streaming. So make sure you keep that in mind as well. Otherwise, make sure you leave a like, make sure you subscribe, and we'll see you in the next one soon. But Wally, thanks so much for jumping on, man. I appreciate it.
Absolutely appreciate you having me, and make sure you want to check out more of that guy right there talking to this bozo here. The Damn Sports Show. Go to dailydodge.com. We have all of our shows daily. They're going to be archived there. You can watch us on YouTube as well. Lots of places to see Cory kind of put up with this guy, and man, that's a full-time job.
So we've got, it's called The Damn Sports Show. If you look up Daily Dodge TV in the YouTube search bar, we have a live show from 4 to 5 p.m. Central Time here in Wisconsin, where we're mostly talking Wisconsin professional sports. We have a high school scene tab as well. But we do talk about national topics at different times. It's just a great way to get to know us a little bit better. We do have a buzzer beater in the chat. We have Jason Noble saying flex play. We're looking at Olave, Addison coming off that very nice week, or Drake London. Just looking at these different matchups here. Gosh. Olave against the Chiefs is going to be a tough one unless you want to make the argument that they'll throw it a lot playing from behind.
No, Derek Carr, I love him, but he can't play in primetime. Do not do that. That one was a no-brainer. I'm more or less stuck on, do I like the idea of Addison against the Jets, where you have Justin Jefferson probably going with Sauce Gardner. You'd imagine that probably makes Addison's workload look a lot more promising there. So, I mean, I guess Addison would be my narrow leader, just because, again, too, it's hard to trust anything that the Falcons do on offense.
Yeah, kind of what I was thinking, too. The Falcons going up against the Buccaneers, little NFC South action, in the Thursday night matchup. Totals are around the same. Falcons and Buccaneers are 43.5, 40.5 for the Jets and Vikings. So I am probably leaning Addison as well. You're kind of in the same headspace as me, Wally, where you've got a lockdown corner, so much to the point that it's likely going to help him, because Sauce Gardner against Justin Jefferson, one, it's good TV, but two, it's a no-brainer for a defensive coordinator and a defensive mind like Robert Saleh. So I think we do go Addison here, knowing that there's going to be some attention off of him. Olave, tough spot against the tough Chiefs defense. And London going up against a Bucs defense that is looking a lot better. They used to be one of the defenses I would prowl on, and now we're seeing lower totals in those contests as well. Falcons also looking relatively unproven and not as well-oiled of a machine as it looked like. Who would have thought when you don't have a preseason that stuff can happen in the first month? So thank you guys so much for joining. We have Jordan Whitrock saying goodnight, boys. Appreciate it. Jason, hope that helped. Hope that helped all of you. Same with Johnny D. We've got Brian, Alex, Sports Type, Jerry, all of you. Thank you so much for the recent support. We will see you in the next stream very soon.